Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome you all to the last panel session of the 3rd International Young Folklorists Conference. Since Friday, we are enjoying a vibrant array of panel discussions, paper presentations, roundtable conversations, and special keynote addresses exploring dynamic ways in which vernacular traditions continue to shape cultural memory, community knowledge, and lived practices within the broader framework of Indian knowledge system. In this panel, we will be listening to our distinguished speakers on the topic folk performance, tradition, and embodied healing practices. I have the honor to introduce the chair of the session, Dr. Aswathy Rajan, Director, Padma Foundation. Welcome, ma'am. We are fortunate to have you with us. And our honorable speakers are Dr. Rose Merin, Assistant Professor, Bharat Mata College, Dr. Sreebitha PV, Associate Professor, Department of Studies in English, Kannur University, Dr. Sneha Sasikumar, Kuchipudi Practitioner and Academic Advisor. Now I request Dr. Aswathy Rajan to take over the session from now. Please, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. And everyone, good afternoon. I'm Aswathy Rajan. Currently, I'm running an NGO, Padma Foundation, that is focusing on art into social work. Previously, I was working with Rajagiri College of Social Science as the Assistant Director and Assistant Professor of Indian Knowledge Systems. That's how I came into this conference. And it's my privilege and my, I'm so blessed to be a chair of this session. And in this session, we will explore the intersections of folk performance traditions and embodied healing practices with our distinguished speakers. Because here we have 3 other distinguished speakers. All are actually focusing on this embodied healing areas. Dr. Rose Merin, as mentioned, as Assistant Professor in English Literature and Multidisciplinary Faculty in Bharata Mata College, and she has expertise in Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi, Mohiniyattam, and Nangyal Kuttu. And her focus is performativity and gender studies. And Dr. Sreebitha PV is an associate professor in Kannur University, focusing gender studies and also performance culture. And Dr. Sneha Sasikumar is a well-known Kuchipudi artist and an academic advisor. Has been doing UGC NET coaching for several years now, and also giving PhD, academic advisors for PhD and MOC projects. And also, she is an expert in dance therapy, and her works is published in nationally and internationally. So I welcome you all the speakers to the panel. So without losing much time, we will start now with Dr. Rose Merin.
Yeah, I have a small request. Can I start it after the first speaker, because there's some problem with my camera. I'm just trying to get it rectified.
Oh, okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Then
Thank you.
Is Sreebitha ma'am joined?
Start with Sneha, no?
Yeah, Sneha. Okay, Sneha, please do start.
Good afternoon, respected scholars, faculty members, Professor Jolly sir, all my fellow researchers. I would like to thank the University of Hyderabad. Am I visible to all of you? Right?
Yes.
Thank you. So thank you so much for inviting me to this conference, and it's such a huge privilege for me to be talking to the research community here. So I did my PhD on dance movement therapy, working on the history and evolution of dance movement therapy in India. So talking about such a favorite, or my personal favorite topic of mine, healing and embodying systems, I thought to share with an example on how, as a performer as well, how I can contribute to the society, how I can contribute to the healing practices in the country. Thank you so much for inviting me for the session. I would like to just share my screen. Second. Is the screen visible to all of you?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So today I'll be discussing on folk performance traditions and embodied healing with majorly particular attention to traditional ritual performances based in Kerala and how these spaces or these performance traditions work as a function for emotional ventilation and somatic release. So we all know these folk performances as part of community healing as well as ritualistic performances. How we can apply these performance traditions from a psychological and psychotherapeutic lens? That is what I'm trying to look at today. We all know across cultures, folk performances are almost primarily viewed as entertainment, or maybe part of rituals or ritual celebrations, or maybe something related to storytelling traditions. But if we examine closely, there is a deep therapeutic dimension that actually influences the physical well-being and emotional balance, along with the social harmony that otherwise also provides. So today in my presentation, I'll be majorly talking about the three major aspects. One is understanding embodied healing. What is embodied healing? The second one is the healing dimensions of folk performance traditions. And the third one would be the contemporary therapeutic implications of these performance studies. So understanding the embodied healing dimensions within the folk traditions, the rhythmic movements and other somatic release principles, the collective participation and the concept called emotional ventilation, and other examples of psychotherapeutic theories, and the connections with DMT, which is dance movement therapy. So to start with, understanding embodied movement. What is embodied healing? So let us understand what embodied healing means. So, if you look at the definition, it can purely state that the physical movement, any sensory experience, any emotional expression, which is entwined with the cultural practices, which may or may not contribute to restoring the balance within the community. That is what embodied healing means. However, I want to look at it with, unlike the purely biomedical approaches that we see, whenever we talk about the psychiatric issues, we have a tendency to purely connect it to biomedical approaches. However, if we consider body as a mechanical system, that is when we can equate embodied healing too. So for example, according to embodied healing theory, body stores memory and emotion. So when we talk about a movement, it can release psychological tension as well. And also, when there is a ritual performance happening, these restoring of this psychological and social equilibrium is what we aim at, knowingly or unknowingly. So scholars in both anthropology, performance studies, and also somatic therapy and therapeutic practices, they all see healing as not just a medical act, but also as something which has a lot of influence between cultural and performative experience as such. So, of course, in many traditional societies, we can see dance, theater, music, storytelling aspects. These are all part of ritual enactment. However, integrating this to the healing process, that is what is meant by embodied healing as such. So, through rhythmic movements, through breath, through sensory experiences, how we are able to transform these engagement and to make a renewal. How can we do this? That is what is meant by embodied healing. So when we come to folk performance traditions as healing practices as such, so folk performance or folk traditions across the world, it exactly demonstrates how art, ritual, and healing intersect, which is a very, very less discussed topic, however. Many performances, when we look at it historically, that might have developed within a religious spectrum or an agricultural context or community context, where they all served function, something which is beyond entertainment. Oh, I'm so sorry. There's a power failure. Just give me a sec. I'm so sorry. I think I'm back. Yeah. So we were talking about the cultural context. Yeah, maybe religious purpose, agriculture purpose, or maybe community-based context. So earlier, traditionally, if you look at the history of these developments, we can see these performance traditions helped communities majorly to process grief, or maybe to manage some kind of collective anxiety, or maybe to restore some kind of social cohesion, or maybe to connect with some of their spiritual beliefs that we all know, or maybe something like to reinforce cultural identity as well. Yeah. So even if we look at all of these aspects, there is some kind of healing mechanism that happens within these contexts. For example, when we look at rhythmic movement and semantic release, so we all know rhythm is the major, the basic role in any major folk performances. So there is like this repetitive patterns of, maybe it can be like drums, drumming, or maybe chanting, or maybe some kind of collective dance movement as such. So all these stimulate our nervous system and create a kind of somatic synchronization. That is how we call it. So in a rhythmic engagement, how do we say that it can reduce stress, it can improve emotional regulation, or that kind of collective participation? That is what I want to look at today. Okay. So for example, in almost all of the ritualistic dance traditions, you can see some kind of like trance-like states, which majorly anthropologists, they interpreted it as some kind of physical mechanisms, maybe some kind of effort to release their emotional stress as part of healing. So here, the body is the medium where these kind of stored emotions and tensions or anxieties or all these psychological words that we have been hearing quite often these days, they are expressed as well as transformed. However, this collective participation is one of the key aspects in social healing when we look at these performance traditions. All these traditions are rarely performed as individual acts. We all know that it's like a communal experience where maybe villagers gather together, they sing together, they dance together, or maybe they collectively witness some kind of a performance. Maybe it can be a ritualistic performance as well. So in this collective participation, we know that there is a sense of belongingness, there is a sense of social connection. Also, these are all parts of psychological well-being. Okay, so in modern research, psychology itself suggests that this community bonding that significantly reduces stress and emotional isolation as such. So in this folk performance traditions, if we look at it, initially itself this kind of social healing spaces coming together of all these communities together, where individuals, they connect with each other, they connect with their community experience, they connect with this cultural identity itself is a first step towards healing. So, for example, I would like to quote the example of Sarpam Thulal, which is a traditional ritualistic performance of Kerala. You must have heard about it. So it's one of the most fascinating examples I can say, because this is usually performed it's a ritualistic performance associated with a serpent worship, okay? And it's mostly performed in Sarpakava or sacred groves or in front of certain spaces, which is like solely given for this. Sarpam Thulal is majorly performed by women, and they majorly performed by women belonging to certain groups, certain ritual lineages as such. And also it involves a lot of rhythmic chanting, a lot of repetitive body movements, and almost all of the body movements, they mirror a kind of serpent-like movements. For example, there will be drawing of serpent diagram, which is called kalam, and they dance in front of these columns, and they go into a trance-like state after a point. So in this ritual, performer gradually enters to a kind of an altered state or altered kind of consciousness, and they often display a kind of intense, I'll definitely say it is a very intense emotional physical expression. If you watched it, you would definitely equate it that way. But having said this is from a performer's point of view. From an anthropological perspective, this performance functions as a very rich cathartic ritual space, majorly because a lot of suppressed emotions, let it be fear, let it be grief, let it be anxiety, let it be any kind of social tensions that arise due to hierarchy, social hierarchy, These are all expressed through the body. So, for instance, in a performance, you can see performers. They are not even performers actually. They are normal participants who come to experience the performance. By the end of the performance, they join the ritual. They cry. There will be a lot of shaking kind of experience. There will be a lot of spontaneous movements, deep breathing, the kind of emotional outbursts that you can see. These are not viewed as a pathological thing within the ritual context. If you look at it, they are often understood as manifestations of, or kind of divine possession or kind of spiritual release that happens. So in a psychological point of view, you can see that these can also be interpreted as forms of emotional ventilation. So that is where this embodied expression is released, or the participants are actually allowed to release these deeply held emotional tensions within themselves. So here, apart from the psychotherapeutic and psychological principles, you can also look at the principles such as body-mind relational theories, for example, grounding theories, empathetic attunement, mirroring, and also kind of kinesthetic empathy, even holding and containment theories also. So here, in just this example of one ritualistic form, which is called Sarpam Thullal, you can see this kind of individual psychological distress, which is being transformed into a collective spiritual experience. And also there will be like a lot of family members sitting together, musicians, ritual specialists, and all these observers or community observers. They all contribute to creating a shared space which gives support to these people, and also it gives them a validation to have this emotional ventilation. So this community, for example, this communal participation strengthens the healing process, because the individual is not just isolated, but rather they're held together as a community in a culturally meaningful framework. So almost in all the cases, the participants after the performance, I have got the opportunity to interview many of these participants, and most of them talked about the relief, the kind of emotional lightness that they felt after the performance, the psychological clarity that they got after the performance, or maybe kind of a spiritual reassurance as well for some of them. So all these aspects I always connected with kind of therapeutic principles of dance movement therapy as well. So in dance movement therapy also, when you look at the therapeutic dimensions of these rituals, you can see the framework of DMT being the same with that of these healing practices. However, the psychotherapeutic usage of them is not directly proportional as such. That's it. So for example, body awareness tools, body movement tools, for example, the emotional, cognitive, social integration, that is exactly what DMT is saying. All these empathetic attunement process, or the direct expressions of these emotional states, all these you can see, you can observe this clear, kind of shared space in both ritualistic performances as well as in DMT. And when you look at the body-mind connection, so in the same example, like in Sarpam Thullal, this kind of rhythmic stepping, the kind of trembling, the swaying movements that are almost like a serpent movement, the breathing patterns which are almost altered in that kind of emotional state. All these things we can equate to the DMT principles, where they can emotionally resonate with the movement of others or themselves. Okay, so when in a ritualistic performance, all these audience and musicians, they all become part of this emotional engagement within the sphere, with the performers' movement as well. So as I told you, the drumming, the chanting, the communal focus, the kind of shared emotional atmosphere, all these helps in the healing process, and through collective empathy, collective energy, and a kinesthetic empathy attunement that has been developed as a group. So these serpent motions and all these kind of emotional ventilation that happens, that has been externalized through the internal emotions, but in a very culturally meaningful imagery. So this guided imagery concept that we practice as a dance movement therapist is very clearly visible in these practices, where the kind of meaningful imagery is being created as a whole group. That's it. Apart from this, when we look at the symbolic, narrative, and emotional experience as well, emotional processing as well, most of the folk performances, if you look at it, they talk with talk about stories or narrate the stories of struggle or maybe transformation or maybe some kind of a divine intervention as well. These are all developed as part of a moral order that has been established as well. So it is basically these narratives allow the communities to majorly symbolically process these complex emotions. As I told you earlier, maybe fear, grief, or conflict, and all of these, and they're collectively interpreted through emotional healing. So this ritual, spirituality, and the transcendence that happens as part of it. These are all part of spiritual belief systems. However, these ritual elements that can be invocatory offering or a sacred gesture offering, all these create a liminal space. So it's like a temporary environment where this everyday social boundaries, all these everyday social hierarchies, they dissolve, and the participants, they enter into a transformative state. So within the space, performers, audiences, all the people who are gathered there, they get a spiritual connection through emotional catharsis and psychological renewal. So this is where both artistic expressions and sacred healing practices come together. So I wanted to take this particular example so that it will be easier for us to visualize what kind of a performance it will be usually. And mostly this embodied knowledge is being carried by folk performers themselves, but they often don't know the psychological aspect. However, for example, all the traditional performers, they inherit these kind of performances either through oral transmission, all of you must be doing, or maybe through any lived practices. These are all not part of written documentation at all. These are all like archivals of cultural memory, or maybe carrying forward the techniques which have been passed on to them. So this kind of rhythmic coordination, this kind of ritual discipline, these are all not documented and taught to the generation, but it's part of a disciplined oral tradition. So all these 3 years of training, performance and all, they gradually develop an awareness and how maybe unknowingly they are witnessing how movement affects their mind and body. So these folk performances, as I told in the introduction, they are not actually just entertainers. They are not just part of entertainment, but they are actually custodians of embodied healing tradition. So as you can see in the slide, to understand how a folk performance actually contribute to healing, we should actually examine through psychological and psychotherapeutic frameworks rather than interpreting them just as a cultural ritual and maybe just analyzing them as a ritualistic process. So moving on, coming to the symbolic expression and narrative processing, as we all know, Collins' guided imagery, symbolic imagery method, all these archetypal narratives, they help individuals. This is why I said the example of Sarpantural. So this is kind of an unconscious emotional experience that has been offered to the performers and the people who come and watch the performance as well. And it's when we look at the relevance in the contemporary context, okay, in the recent days, we know how these therapeutic disciplines, the modern therapeutic disciplines functions, and let it be dance movement therapy, let it be expressive arts therapy, let it be somatic psychology therapies, all these look at these principles, what movement and embodied expression as the process of healing. Interestingly, many of these modern therapeutic techniques, they reflect on principles that actually exist in folk traditions, and they maybe for like centuries, we don't even know when these kind of performance traditions started getting established. They are still replicating these therapeutic techniques which are there in these folk traditions. So most of the contemporary mental health practices, all art-based therapies, all community well-being initiative, all these kind of modern contemporary mental health therapeutic practices, we as a community, as I'm part of SIMTRI, I'm part of Creative Movement Therapy Association of India, I know how almost all of these practitioners, all of these therapists use these kind of heritage artifacts. They recognize them as living system of knowledge. They recognize this as a something which profound therapeutic potential as such, and they all take elements from these performance traditions and not just conceiving them as a cultural entertainment aspect, but taking them as a complex system that integrate all of these movement, rhythm, storytelling, and psychological aspects together as part of community participation. If you look at Chase Circle and DMT, all the therapists recently, they all create this powerful experience of, coming together in a group, sitting in a circle and having embodied healing practice. These are exactly what is being done, in all these ritual practices being there from centuries. So studying these traditions through the lens of performance studies, of course, with anthropological aspects, with therapeutic practice is the most important, concept of the time, because recognizing culture, healing, and body, they're all interconnected. They are all entwined together. You cannot separate them. Unknowingly, we are all practicing DMT as part of, taking aspects from these traditions. But it's also important to recognize and preserve these traditions, not just to have a cultural heritage, to have a opportunity to establish this cultural performance system, but also to reconnect modern society with a holistic form of well-being as well. So I would like to conclude this session. I know it's such a small period. I don't want to take a lot of time, but I would like to conclude this with this notion that the need for preserving these kind of traditions is not just matter of anthropological perspective alone, but as an aspect of embodied healing, psychological recognition, and these should be established as part of mental health practices in India, which is not recognized yet. So thank you so much for patiently listening to my sessions, and I'm hoping that this was a little fruitful for you and open to more discussions on this. Thank you so much for the University of Hyderabad, for Jolly sir, for inviting me for the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sneha, for that profound definition of dance therapy and explanation on folk traditions, influence of folk traditions in movement therapy. And I request Merin, please, to present.
Very good afternoon, my dear panelists and participants who are listening to me right now. Before I begin, I take a moment to express my deep felt gratitude to Professor Jolie Puducherry, head of the Center for Folk Culture Studies, for his generous mentorship and for inviting me to deliver this lecture. And thank you to the organizers, CFSR and University of Hyderabad as well. As anyone here would agree, encouragement and support like these are invaluable for our academic journey. And I remain sincerely thankful for the opportunity to engage with such an important scholarly platform. So our panel is titled Folk Performance Tradition and Embodied Healing Practices. And Dr. Sneha Sasikumar actually opened it up rightly through the different dimensions of performance. And she was talking about performance as healing, embodied healing, and mostly from a personal perspective, right? So I am going to I have come here with a story. Okay, so and I'll be extending this argument to talk about how performance is actually healing communities as well. And I see many faces who are from different parts of India, and you might not be clearly aware of certain performance traditions specific to Kerala. So, which is why I said just listen to it as a story. And this story happened last month, so it's very recent. Could you please open my PPT? The one who is handling the technical side.
Yes, I have talked to Sreebitha. She's a technical assistant for this session. She will be showing.
Okay. Yeah, so my talk is titled Madhravilapam, Translating the Passion of Christ through Nanyar Kutha. So here,
Yes, give me a minute. I am showing your PPT.
Okay. So this is all about a 1,000-year-old form meeting a new story. Among the many classical performance traditions of India, Nangyarkut occupies a unique position. Widely considered the only surviving dance drama tradition historically performed exclusively by women, Nangyarkut represents one of the earliest models of female performance within the classical theatre traditions of South Asia. Rooted in Kerala and closely associated with Kudiyattam, the Sanskrit theatre tradition, recognized by UNESCO as a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity, Nangyarkuttu has for centuries existed within a carefully preserved ritualistic and aesthetic framework.
Is there any
Traditionally-
problem, Samriddhi? Otherwise, I can show it on my behalf.
Shall I
Samriddhi?
continue?
Yeah, ma'am, 1 second, just let me show your PPT.
I shared my PPT, but can you not see it? Because I did share
No,
it.
no, it is not visible. I mean, it was visible, but then suddenly it gone.
Wait, let me try
Okay,
again.
till then I am showing on my behalf. When it is fixed, let
Rose, you can continue
Yeah.
speaking. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get that. You'll get. It's coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you have to just open the presentation tab. No. Okay. Let it be. Yeah. So traditionally performed inside the temple theatre known as Kootambalam, Nangyarkut has historically drawn its narratives almost entirely from Hindu mythological sources, especially episodes from the Puranas and epics such as the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Even after the form gradually moved beyond temple spaces into cultural institutions and secular stages during the 20th century, its narrative repertoire remained largely unchanged. It is precisely within this context that the performance Matravilapam, or the Mother's Lament, becomes historically significant. Conceived by Kathakali enthusiast Kuchipudi Matthew and performed by Kalamandalam Sangeeta, the production adapts episodes from the life of Jesus Christ based on P.C. Devasia's Sanskrit Mahakavya, Kristu Bhagavatam. The performance represents perhaps the first sustained engagement of Nangyarkutta with a Christian narrative, staged not inside a temple, but within a church complex. Could you please play the video which I have shared of the performance space?
Yes, okay.
Okay, meanwhile, the performance thus becomes more than a creative experiment. It offers a compelling example of how classical art traditions can transcend religious boundaries, allowing an ancient performative vocabulary to interpret a story belonging to a different cultural and theological tradition. Now, I'll just brief you about the historical background of Nangyarkutta. The origins of Nangyarkutta are closely linked to the history of Kudiyattam, Kerala's classical Sanskrit theatre. Tradition attributes the institutionalization of Nangyarkutta to King Kulashekara Perumal or Kulashekara Varman, who ruled Kerala from Mahodayapuram or the present-day Kodungalur between 978 and 1036 CE. A noted patron of the arts, he is also credited with composing two Sanskrit plays, Tapati Samvaranam and Subhadra Dhananjayam, both of which became part of the Nangyarkutta repertoire. For centuries, these performances, is it coming?
Yes, can you tell me which video do you want me to play?
The second one. Sorry. Okay, so this is where I just wanted to introduce you to the person whose brainchild this performance was. Could you please drag it a bit forward so that you can actually see Kuchipudi Matthew, the one who came up with this idea, and this is actually his brainchild. A bit further. He's been felicitated by, so he's a septuagenarian, 70 plus old man, who actually thought of creating something like this. And he's been felicitated by the priests. And I'll be talking about it a little further. Okay, so there is one more, which is very unique because, as I told you, historically, Nangiyar happened within a temple complex. And in spite of the fact that it's been more than 1,000 years since its inception, the form's inception, and it's been exactly 61 years since it has come out of the temple and it has been secularized, such a performance has never happened in the history of Nangiyar, which is remarkable. So if you could please show the video of the performance venue, probably you'll be able to understand it a bit more.
Yes, sorry. Which video?
I think it's the last one.
Okay, the last one.
Yeah, the reception. So this is within the church complex, and you can see the number of people who are so into watching a performance that they have absolutely no idea of, except for a few who are seated there. All of them are novice to this art form. Okay, so for centuries, these performances remained confined to temple theaters and were presented before an elite audience familiar with Sanskrit aesthetics and ritual practices. The tradition underwent a significant transformation only in the 20th century. In 1965, under the leadership of the legendary artist Painkulam Ramachakyar, Kudiyatam and related forms began moving beyond temple spaces to institutions such as Kerala Kalamandalam. Alongside this shift came renewed attention to female performance traditions, bringing Nangiyar into wider public recognition. Thus, while the art form itself has a history spanning nearly 1,000 years, its presence outside temple complexes roughly 66 decades old. I'll just speak a little bit about the performance structure and the ritual format that was followed in Matruvilapam, which is exactly as it is in traditional Nangiyar performance. So despite being a new production, Matruvilapam faithfully followed the traditional ritual and performative structure of Nangiyar. The performance opened with the ceremonial lighting of the brass lamp, symbolically making the beginning of a sacred performance space. This was followed by Meeravu Ochapidithal, or a sound test of the large copper percussion instrument known as Meeravu, as you can see in the photograph, which forms the rhythmic backbone of Kudiyatam and Nangiyar. The performer then entered the stage and offered salutations to the instrument, the stage, and the assembled audience through the ritual gesture of Meeravu Vanangal and Sabha Nirikshanam, acknowledging both the sacred and communal dimensions of performance. The opening verses were rendered in a particular melodic mode, accompanied by stylized gestures that purify the body and prepare it for performance, reminiscent of tantric mudras. The performer then presented a samkshebam, or a concise summary of the day's narrative, before entering into detailed elaboration. Nangiyar belongs to the category of Natya Prabandham, a narrative dance drama form in which storytelling unfolds primarily through abhinaya or expressive acting rather than spoken dialogue. The performance often moves through nirvahanam, a flashback technique where the protagonist recounts past events leading up to the present moment. Although the narrative may involve many characters, the performance remains a solo act, with the performer transforming into multiple roles through Pagarnatam, a technique of rapid character transition achieved through shifts in posture, facial expression, and gesture. It's almost like the modern day mono act, if any of you have actually seen it, the one act performance. So the accompanying musicians included veteran Meeravu player Ratish Bas, who is also Kalamandalam Sankita's husband, Kalamandalam Krishnadas on the second Meeravu, Margi Agil on Idakya, and Kalamandalam Sajida on Ilathalam, who also recited the Sanskrit verses. The costume adhered strictly to tradition. Nothing was changed, except maybe for the white attire, which is usually off-white, but she changed it to white in order to portray Mother Mary. But the red headgear, elaborate ornaments, all of that was retained as it is. Also maintaining the stylized Margi aesthetic rather than moving toward a more colloquial narrative style. I'll talk a bit about how they conceived the performance. This was, as I told you, actually a vision of Kuchiti Matthew. The genesis of Matruvilapam lies in the lifelong passion of Kuchiti Matthew, a septuagenarian Kathakali enthusiast and the current secretary of Kuruchi Keli Guru Sripuram Kathakali Sangam in Kottayam. Born into a middle-class agricultural family, as the youngest of 9 children, Matthew first encountered Kathakali as a teenager when a local Swami invited him to watch a performance of Duryodhanavada. That evening left a lasting impression. He vividly recalls watching Kalamandalam Krishnan Nair as a fierce Bhima, Mangulam Krishnan Nambudiri as Krishna, and Kudamalur Karnakaran Nair as Panchali. For the young boy, the grandeur of Krishnan Nair's presence, his costume filling the stage and his acting commanding the entire performance space was unforgettable. From that moment, Matthew became what Malayalis affectionately calls Kathakali Brandhan, someone passionately devoted to the art form. For a loose translation, I would say a Kathakali nut or nutcase. So his fascination deepened over the years. Family influences reinforced this interest. His relatives owned rare Kathakali songbooks, or Pattupustakam as he calls, as it was called, at a time when such materials were scarce. I insisted on Pattupustakam because rather than Padam, as Kathakali verses are called right now, which reflects an older linguistic tradition in Malayalam literary history. As you can see, I'm not touching upon many theoretical words, as I told you. I'm just telling it more like a story because we'll talk about theory if we have time. Later in life, Matthew moved to Saudi Arabia for work, unable to attend live performances. Like most Keralites who are at the mercy of, Gulf remittance, he too moved to the Gulf for work. And unable to attend live performances, he relied on video cassettes of classic Kathakali plays such as Kijagavadham and Duryodhanavadham. So this was around the 70s. Early 70s and late 70s and early 80s. Video cassettes were in circulation during this time. So after returning to Kerala and retiring from work, he began studying Sanskrit and attending performances more actively, even as he experienced the early stages of dementia. This renewed immersion in classical performance eventually brought him into contact with Chenganur Hari Sharma and Sajneev Itithanam, who would later collaborate with him in realizing his long-cherished idea. So Sanjeev Itithanam is an engineer who is working in Idiki, and Hari Sharma is a Malayalam teacher teaching high school students. Now, from this inscription to the script, how did it go? The seed for Matruvilapam was planted during a Kudiyatam performance Matthew attended in a temple. Initially hesitant because the performance was in Sanskrit, he was surprised to find that he could follow much of it through gestures and expression, thanks to the shared vocabulary between Kathakali and Kudiyatam. As you might already know, Kathakali evolved from Kudiyatam, and such a humble person that he is, he says, oh my God, I don't even know Malayalam properly. How am I going to understand Sanskrit? But to his surprise, he understands most of it. Later, watching a Nangyakutta performance depicting Kamsa's attempt to kill the infant Krishna, he was reminded of King Herod's order to kill infant boys after hearing about the birth of Jesus. This parallel between the two stories stirred a creative possibility in his mind. Could the story of Christ be presented through the medium of Nangyakutta? When he shared his idea with Sajneev Itithanam, they recall P.C. Devasia's Sanskrit epic, Christu Bhagavatam, studied in school. 2 Sanskrit verses from this text became the foundation of the performance. Another important inspiration came from O.N.V. Kurup's poem, Michelangelo Marper. Could you please move to that slide? written in response to the vandalization of Michelangelo's famous sculpture Pieta. Okay, this is another interesting segment. So the poem vividly describes the moment when Christ's body is taken down from the cross and placed in the lap of the grieving Virgin Mary. Now, O.N.V. Kurupu, sitting in Kerala, far away from the actual incident takes place, asks Michelangelo for forgiveness. Okay, so this is how the poem begins. The opening lines. Finally, the body was taken down from the cross. Below stood a mother, turned to sunstone in her deep sorrow. With tender affection, she gathered upon her lap the cold, holy body of her son. The word oduve, or finally, or at last, captures the entire agony of the passion narrator, the culmination of suffering that no mother could bear. Harish Sharma and Sajani Vittithanam developed the performance text, while Kalamandalam Sankita prepared the Ata Prakaram, or the acting manual, guiding the performer's gestures, expressions, and transitions. I'll just touch upon the storyline. The performance opens with an image that is both intimate and monumental. Mother Mary seated with a lifeless body of Christ resting across her lap, echoing the timeless visual language of the Pieta. I'm sure all of you might have seen it. If not, could you please move to the next slide? From this still and silent moment begins the unfolding of memory. As Mary gazes upon the body of her son, the narrative gradually moves into Nirvahanam, the flashback technique, central to Nanya Kutta. The mother's lament becomes the thread through which the entire life of Jesus is recalled. From the moment he was conceived, the grieving mother suggests through gestures and expression, my son faced suffering. The performer moves seamlessly between characters, Mary, Joseph, angels, kings, disciples, soldiers, each transformation marked by subtle shifts in stance and expression. The story begins with Mary's betrothal to Joseph. An angel appears, announcing that she will bear the Son of God. The performer captures the turmoil of a young woman suddenly confronted with divine destiny, bewilderment, fear, and quiet acceptance. Now she submits to God's command. When Mary tells Joseph about the miraculous conception, his internal conflict unfolds with remarkable emotional depth. He is completely shaken and he doesn't know what to do. So he chooses not to disgrace her publicly, but plans to withdraw quietly until an angel appears in his dream and reassures him of the divine plan. Now he is being put as a steward for the Son of God, and Joseph then accepts the verdict. The narrative then moves to the journey to Bethlehem, undertaken for the census ordered by Caesar Augustus. The couple searches desperately for shelter in a town crowded with travelers. Every door closes. Finally, the child is born in a humble manger. One of the most powerful moments of the performance occurs here, the depiction of childbirth. Could you please play the video on the childbirth scene? Though executed within the stylized grammar of Nanyar Kutta, the scene felt startlingly human. The performer's portrayal of labor pain. This is Mother Mary trying to give birth. This is the giving birth episode of Mother Mary giving birth to child Jesus. So look at the way she holds her breath, tension, exhaustion, and this made the audience viscerally aware of the physical ordeal of birth. Several viewers later remarked how instinctively they tightened their own bodies while watching the scene unfold. There were many men who were almost into tears, and even the priest himself talked about how he was reminded of his wife's childbirth time, and there were men clutching their underbellies, writhing in pain. So this is the effect a performance can actually transfer. Soon after, shepherds arrive, guided by a star, followed by the three magi bearing gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But joy quickly turns to danger as King Herod, fearing the birth of a rival king, orders the killing of all male infants in Bethlehem. The performance then shifts to episodes from Christ's adult life: his baptism by John the Baptist, the calling of fishermen as disciples, and the miracle of calming the storm on the Sea of Galilee are presented through striking theatrical imagery. The storm sequence provided a powerful moment for the percussion ensemble. Thunder rolled through the resonance of the mirava. The idakya echoed the chaotic rhythm of wind and waves. Through coordinated gesture and sound, the performer created the illusion of a boat pitching violently on turbulent water. Disciples struggling in fear until Christ's presence brings the sea into sudden calm. Gradually, the narrative darkens. Judas' betrayal, the arrest of Jesus. Could you please play the next clip about the Passion of Christ? And the brutal procession towards Golgotha unfold with increasing intensity. The crucifixion sequence is rendered with painstaking detail. You can actually move to the towards the end. So here you see Judas betraying Christ. His hands are handcuffed. He's been dragged, bullied, jeered, all of it. So it's quite detailed here. The crucifixion sequence is rendered with painstaking detail. The weight of the cross, the jeering soldiers, the hammer striking iron spikes, and you actually feel it in your body when you listen to the idakya playing. And the body raised upright against the sky. The audience watched in stunned silence. At last, the story returns to the opening image. Mary holding her son's body. The stillness now carries the weight of everything that has been remembered. Yet the narrative does not end in despair. The burial of Christ is followed by the moment of resurrection, portrayed through radiant facial expressions and ascending movement. The performance closes with a prayer that the risen Christ bless all who have witnessed the story. Now, translating cultures through performance. Adapting a Christian narrative into Nangyar Kutha required careful cultural translation. Some gestures central to Hindu wedding rituals, such as the symbol of holding of hands or exchange of garlands, could not be directly used to depict the betrothal of Mary and Joseph. So, for instance, in the Jewish tradition, because Christianity is also coming from Judaism, and as we all know, Christ did not create Christianity. At first, there is this betrothal or marriage fixation that happens. Marriage doesn't happen then, and there is initially there used to be a 1-year period where both the bride and groom lived separately, and then there is the actual marriage which happens later. So, which is not so in a Hindu tradition, and it's easy in a Hindu tradition to show marriage or marriage being fixed as, you know, holding of hands and exchange of garland, which is not something that can be shown here. So there are many such translation issues that they overcame very beautifully. So, for example, Jesus had to be shown through a new mudra itself, but it was not new. If you watch the performance, you would know it was translated beautifully. So such challenges illustrate how performance traditions must sometimes invent new expressive possibilities while remaining faithful to their inherited grammar. Now, a bit about how it was received and how the audience took it. This was the performance was premiered at St. Paul's Orthodox Church in Pallam, Kottayam, before an audience of over 250 people, as you could see, including parish members, Kudiyatam enthusiasts, and priests from both Christian and Hindu traditions. There were people coming from all over Kerala, at least all over middle Kerala, to watch this performance. And many in the audience were witnessing Nangyarkuttu for the first time, as I already told you. To assess them, contextual explanations were projected digitally during the performance, as you might have already seen in the performance venue. On one side, there was a digital screen which was kept, which had the translated version of what was, of what was being performed on the stage. So even if you didn't know the mudra, you could actually read it and then see it happening side by side. Yet even without prior familiarity, spectators followed the narrative with remarkable ease. The production had earlier been previewed on the terrace of Kuchipudi Matthew's home before an audience of about 100 people, including both connoisseurs and newcomers. Their feedback helped refine the final staging. Following the performance, praise from the Orthodox Church and the chief priest of a nearby temple jointly honored the artists, an extraordinary moment symbolizing the collaborative spirit behind the project. So there was actually the chief priest from the temple nearby, a famous temple, and also 3 or 4 priests, as well as the bishop who has come all the way. And he said he particularly wanted to watch this, and he came all the way to watch this performance. And the event drew appreciation from His Highness Johannon Mar Dioscros, head of the Kottayam Diocese of the Orthodox Syrian Church, who observed, art traverses boundaries of religion and caste. Art leads you to the eternal. Indeed, the performance demonstrated how a classical art form, historically rooted within Hindu temple culture, could interpret a Christian narrative without appearing foreign or forced, which is important. This moment also raises broader questions about cultural legitimacy. Now, we always heard this idea of Hinduism often described not as a religion founded by a single prophet, unlike the Abrahamic religions, but as a way of life. And the religion also has historically shaped many in classical Indian art forms. Yet certain artistic traditions are labeled cultured within a Hindu framework. Other cultural expressions risk being marginalized. The performance of Madhurvilapam challenges such boundaries by showing that aesthetic traditions can travel across religious worlds. And in conclusion, I could say that it's stories that shape communities. Abrahamic religions originated in the ancient Near East. And it's interesting that many still believe that Christianity evolved in the West. But that's not how it is. So geographically, it's part of the broader East. When their stories are expressed through an Eastern classical performance traditions like Nangyarkuttu, the encounter feels surprisingly natural. Kerala has long been known for its syncretic cultural landscape, where temples, churches, and mosques exist within shared social worlds. The performance of Madhurvilapam stands as a living example of this tradition. As writers and thinkers have often reminded us, stories shape how communities understand themselves. Margaret Atwood once wrote, "In the end, we will all become stories." John Didion famously observed, "We tell ourselves stories in order to live." And historian Yuval Noah Harari reminds us that stories are humanity's greatest invention because they enable cooperation and shared imagination. In an era when cultural and religious divisions are often amplified for political gain, and we live in a society that celebrates virality, which is often created through polarization, and we have thousands and thousands of documents which actually talk about it, and we just have to look around to, justify what I've just said. Performances like Madhurvilapam remind us of another possibility, that stories can also connect, translate, and heal. Through the expressive body of Nangyarkuttu, the sorrow of a mother holding her crucified son became a shared human experience, one that transcended religious identity and spoke directly to the universal language of grief, compassion, and hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Merin. Thank you for that, touching presentation. Actually, your sound, translate the whole culture, for the whole community life itself to the, listeners. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And
I think I should got engrossed with the presentation and forgot the time is gone.
Time is gone, sir. And Sreebitha ma'am is also not joining due to some unforeseen circumstance. And I am not presenting now. The forum is open for discussions.
So you start commenting, no? Why don't you comment?
Okay. Anything anything you to ask on embodied healing, as Sneha presented all dimensions of embodied healing from the Western notions to the indigenous traditions. So, Sneha, can you explain more about your own practices, your own signature style of implementing a new system in healing, embodied healing?
Hi, thank you for that question. So to be very frank, in my performance aspect, I never looked at it in such a perspective, basically because one issue that we all face being in the world of therapeutic practices is that most of the practitioners, they confuse with healing practices with what they usually feel as healing. For example, postpartum, I had gained a lot of weight. In the process of losing weight, I was told by many of my friends and family that, okay, you should be starting your dancing journey as part of your emotional healing as well as your physical transformation. However, for me, that personal healing process didn't happen through my dance. For me, dance was something very, very normal in my movement vocabulary, and that didn't happen through dance. However, it happened through weight training. So the same way, if you look at the healing aspect from your own performance tradition as such, I have this unpopular opinion. It's very difficult to find your path in popular traditions or popular ways that we are usually comfortable with. So I'm a Kuchipudi practitioner. It is very difficult because, for example, I have seen singer Sujata ma'am sharing the same personal experience as such. For a practitioner like her, she said she cannot heal through music. The same way, unfortunately, I don't know, maybe watching my performance can be healing for some else, but unfortunately, it's not healing for me. For the moment I dance, what I recognize is the mistake, the perfections, the need of corrections, the need where I should be choreographing little more better way, a need to know more in deep about the piece as such and all that. Unfortunately, that didn't happen for me through my performance practice. Yeah. But again, having said that, in a healing practice, it is very important that you have a guided technique from a practitioner of therapeutic practice. For example, if you're trying to work on, let's say, a psychological, a mental health issue, I would always suggest to look at it from a perspective of a professional rather than trying to heal on your own, because having the sense of feeling good or having the sense of feeling better, having a better mood after dancing or anything of in that notion, that is actually not, it's just a dopamine hit that we hit. Just go walking for like 10 minutes, you will get the same dopamine. That you cannot equate that to healing. In fact, you cannot equate that to therapeutic practice. That is my personal suggestion. When we look at therapeutic practices and healing for that matter, I would suggest you to look at from a psychological and psychotherapeutic way of approach. So from that question that you asked, unfortunately to say that I could never practice it from my performance form, I rather got it from another perspectives than from my own performance. Sorry, yes. That is the truth.
The thing is very simple. We are running out of the time. So one thing I realized, two people are more than, I think Debolina also know. But yesterday we have wonderfully managed four people with Anil talking more than 10 minutes. So it was a wonderful session. So today is also a wonderful session. While talking about the Matru Vilapam, you know, even though I'm unable to listen to the sound of the Miravo or the background, but the sound of Rosmarin filled that gap. So Rosmarin gave a sonic scape, and Madhurvilabam literally healed Rose. That's what I felt. You know, in the very interestingly, when I look at the screen, one side the participants are there, one side you are there speaking, another side your small maquette of your own phone is there, another side she's performing this thing. So it's like a multiple bodies in action, you know. So and the way most of your narration has really brought us to there was just text of Madhurvilabam, which I've read very long before. So, you know, I wonderfully, and that engrossing performance, and you are talking, and even though we are devoid of the sound of Mirao, we felt a healing experience. Being a Christian, I felt a healing experience that you have experienced. So in a way, that's what as a healing, you know, a healing transportation. Not through my Modi, but with my sonic scape. So it was very interesting. Thank you so much, Rosemary. Where's Aswathy? I have to stop it because I'm so sorry to say we can take up a couple of questions, maybe one question. Otherwise, I'm not democratic. You wanted to close it, Aswathy? Where is you?
Ma'am, sir, I'm here.
Vinod wanted to ask somebody. There are people like Armin is here. She's working on embodied theater practice. Vinod might have worked on embodiment for some time. There are quite a lot of people. We don't have time. So we can take up one. Vinod wanted to ask something?
Yes. Just to Merin, from performance point of view, see, the story itself, there's a lot of parallels between Krishna's story and the Jesus birth story and all. So while performing, I think almost like 50% of the styles, the gestures they were using were of the traditional, what Sangeeta would have been using before. Am I correct? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because that's what even I said. I mean, you look at it as something very foreign, but it didn't come out as foreign at all. Because if you look at, if we look at the way in which even religion gets translated, there is this. Most of which is something I came to know much later. Most of the religions belong to a particular space, which is in nearby. Middle East as well as India. So there would have been a lot of exchange much before. And when I listen to stories told by these 70-year-old men who are Kathakali aficionados, they used to watch a lot of Kathakali, and there wasn't a difficulty in appreciating an art form. But today you would look at it as something that is foreign to you, but that's not how it came across. And because I have also, and this is probably something Jolly sir would have talked about if there was enough time, like there is always this discussion about Chavitanadagam, and this I heard even last month. Chavitanadagam came into being only because people were watching Kathakali performances and nobody was interested in going to a church. No, but that's not how it is. It is. Why is it so difficult for us to think that two forms can exist side by side and be inspired by both? It can travel both ways, right? So that is something that I found as very inspirational. Anyone could watch any performance because ultimately it's all coming to your body, and body is not something that is very individualistic alone. I mean, it belongs to a community, it belongs to a culture, all of it. Yeah.
Thank you, Aswathy. Wind it up because the session is ready. Arina also, I'm seeing Arina also there. Okay. Aswathy.
Thank you everyone for listening to this a wonderful session. I'm so blessed to to be the chair of this session, because both these talks are thought provoking, and we should actually discuss more about it. maybe if we have conference proceedings, we will have it. And thank you so much, speakers.
Thank you,
and
Aswathy, and thank you,
for
Vinod, for that
the
question.
opportunity.
Thank you, Jolly sir. Thank you, everyone.
And Merin, I think I am her junior. She doesn't remember me, I think.
No, I do remember you. Yes.
We used to see from LS2 and you look the same. No?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jolly.
Okay, I thank you all our distinguished speakers and our chair and conclude this session.
We have now parallel sessions of paper presentation.